Okay, good evening for everyone here on the eastern shore of Nova Scotia and any place on the world if you are watching the recording in our brand new YouTube channel. Uh, Today, we have our guest speaker that is a woman of many talents. But before presenting you our guest speaker, I just want to remember that we are the Eastern Shore Citizen Science Coastal Monitoring Network. Oh, what a long name. So this is why we used to call with our acronym that is ESCOM. And what we are just community members, people living, close to the coast, that we want to be better prepared for any kind of extreme uh, climate event, or that, and we also want to understand better how the coastal dynamics work, and also we want to start having conversation with beaches, why not, or with coastal lagoons. We are people living here on the Eastern Shore that we collect data and we analyze this data and we make better decisions just because we understand better what's happening on the coast. We have some perceptions about what's happening on the coast, but now we also have data to quantify the changes. This is why we go every month to the beaches, to the more than 10 beaches that we are monitoring. We go every month there to monitor the beach profile. That it means how the width of the beach is changing. Also, we are starting very soon to work with granulometry, but also we have weather stations in our houses, in our yard, and we have rain gauges, manual rain gauges that also help us to measure snow. But with all these things, we also, during summer, because it's when plants are more alive, it's not that they are dying, but that's more alive, we have the opportunity to measure the beach vegetation. So during summer, we go to the beach and we identify the plants, and now we have a method to measure and to identify the abundance and the distribution of this plant. So for speaking about that, I want to introduce you our guest speaker, Abirami Ilavajady. She is the research assistant from Dalhousie University, our research assistant as an ESCOM in the coordination, but also she's illustrator and she's studying biology and microbiology and everything. So Abirami, welcome to our 10th webinar. And please start with your presentation.
Thank you for your introduction, Camilo. If you'll all give me a moment, I'm gonna pull up the slides. All right. If you all can't see the slides, please say something. Otherwise, I'm going to assume you all can. But yeah, welcome to my short presentation on beach flora identification and survey methods. The sea's the limit, of course, because the ocean's the thing stopping the plants from growing further onwards. My name is Abirami Ilavajady. I'm a student studying towards a Bachelor of Science degree in microbiology and biology. And for the past summer, I've been staring at plants on beaches all over the northeastern Nova Scotia coasts. So, out of curiosity, just raise your hand. There's a raise hand function in the Google Meets. How many of you guys have gone to the beach lately and seen some plants on it? Just plants growing on the beach. Yeah, quite a few of you. Even more. Yeah. There's lots of plants that grow on the beach. Perhaps not as much as in forests or in grasslands or even in wetlands, but many different varieties of plants grow on the beach. You see grasses, you'll see flowering plants, such as over here. This one is actually the base that's going to grow an evening primrose. You can see strange alien-like plants such as Hawkania. This one here is called Hawkania paploides. Its leaves are almost thick. This is an oyster plant, surprisingly not green, but mint green, nearly blue plant. Now, plants are really important for beaches for a couple of reasons. For example, to prevent coastal erosion. Without all these plants on the beach, coasts and without all these plants on the beach, the dunes that are at the back end of coasts may erode, causing issues for both species habitat. A lot of species live along the beach, some species at risk even, such as piping plovers, as well as causing risks to people's homes and people's lives. As mentioned, plants are also important because they provide habitat for species. This I mentioned just now. This is a piping plover. Piping plovers are a tiny little species of bird that are really, really important to Nova Scotia beaches. They actually nest on Nova Scotia beaches, on sand dunes, in areas that are fairly grassy on those sand dunes. Because we've got, because we have less of these dunes, less available area for piping plovers to nest, we found there's been a decrease in the amount of piping plovers. Piping plovers are these adorable little birds, but they also serve an important role as shorebirds. And so it's really important to protect species like the piping plover, which can be done by protecting plants on our beaches. Another reason, which you all may have known or may not have known, depending on your proclivities, is, oh, I'm missing one. There we go. Because plants can act as food. A lot of these plants on our beaches are actually edible. Camellia dentula, you can see this one over here. It's also known as sea rocket. You know, arugula, the rocket, it almost tastes like arugula, but thicker, juicier, more peppery, generally more flavorful. This is a wonderful salad over here made from a plant called goosefoot, Chenopodium album. Goosefoot actually grows all over Nova Scotia beaches. I've seen it with my own eyes. They're in nearly every beach, and they're actually also edible. Now, among all these plants that we have on all our beaches, there are some plants that are native and some plants that are invasive. So this is a fun piece of trivia. Between these two species of roses that you often see on the beach, which one of these is invasive? Raise your hand right now if you think Rosa rugosa over here, rugose roses, are invasive. All right. One person. A couple more people. And raise your hand if you think this rose over here, Rosa virginiana, the Virginia rose, is invasive. Okay, one person. And a couple more people. All right. So actually, Rosa rugosa is a highly invasive species of rose. It comes from Europe and Asia. And it was imported here because it grows large and it grows fast. But unfortunately, what it doesn't do is it doesn't grow deep roots, which you'll see why deep roots are important in a second. On the other hand, Rosa virginiana is a native species of rose to here. Rosa virginiana may not grow as tall as Rosa rugosa. It may not have as large rose hips as Rosa rugosa, but those roots grow deep, and that's very important. Here's another little piece of trivia. Atriplex prostrata, also known as spear-leafed orage, versus Chenopodium album, also known as goosefoot, white goosefoot. Both of these are found all over Nova Scotia beaches, but raise your hand if you think Atriplex over here is invasive. All right, good few hands for Atriplex. And raise your hand if you think Chenopodium is invasive. And a couple of hands for Chenopodium. So Atriplex prostrata, spearleaf dorite, is an invasive species. Again, comes from Europe, Asia. Chenopodium album, the white-leaved goosefoot, white goosefoot, is native, and as I mentioned before, is edible and makes quite a nice salad. I've had some before. You can find them quite often here in Nova Scotia, and it's quite good in a salad, let me tell you. Why does this whole invasive versus native thing matter anyways, though? Well, there's one reason that I want to propose here. Native species, especially on beach dunes, often have deep roots. These deep roots help reach down and latch into rock and soil down deep. This holds the structure of the beach together, which leads to stable beach dunes. Invasive species, however, don't nearly have as deep roots. Do you remember how I mentioned Rosa rugosa with its large, bushy form, but not very deep roots? They're found all over dunes and beaches here in northeastern Nova Scotia, but their roots aren't very deep. That leads to the soil not being held together and leads to destabilized beach dunes, which can lead to things like this. Unfortunately, when beach dunes are destabilized, very often a lot of people live by the beach, right? Some of you might even live right by the ocean. When you lose the integrity of beach dunes, which are the main thing protecting from coastal erosion, you get instances like this where the coast has eroded so far, some houses are even hanging just out onto the sea. So it's really important to get to know the plants that are on our beach, as well as the species and whether they're native or invasive. But here's my question to you guys. How can we know this? Well, there's a couple of ways we can go about it. First, we can go out onto our beaches and identify the plants that are there. So here in ESCOM, we've been developing a pocket guide. Well, more accurately, Christine has been developing a pocket guide. Christine Lim, for the past summer, has been writing this pocket guide to coastal vegetation in eastern Nova Scotia that takes a list of all of the plants that we've seen in our trips and creates a guide to identifying them. When you have this, you can use this guide or you can use any other plant guide you'd like if they have the plants that you're curious about. But there's 3 key steps that I want to propose to you here to identifying plants. The first step is observe. Different plants have different shapes. Their leaves may have a different shape. They may be jagged, lobed, toothed, or smooth. Their leaves may be in a different orientation to each other. Leaves can alternate, where you have one leaf and then another one on the other side slightly higher up, and then the other one on the first side slightly higher up. Or they may be paired, where each set of leaves is in a pair all along the stem. Another way to identify what a specific plant is by touching that plant. I wouldn't recommend you do this with all plants, of course. There's some plants that are not safe to touch. Most plants on the beach, I found, are fairly safe to touch. This is just an example from my home. I have a couple of plants on my windowsill, and these plants, you can see, have a fuzzy appearance and a fuzzy texture to them. So what you can do is you can touch plants and see, well, are they fuzzy or are they smooth? Do they have a raised, wrinkly leaf structure, or do they have a flat leaf structure? Are the leaves thick or are they thin? And then, of course, if you can't identify it via touching and observing and comparing your observations to a pocket guide, you can always take a photo of it. Some apps, such as PlantNet, which we use here in ESCOM, and we suggest you guys use, or iNaturalist, which is a more well-known app, but is also generalized to more as well as plants as well as animals. They allow you to take a photo and upload it to their servers, and they identify the plant for you. This is a great way to identify plants, to get to know, hey, this plant might be this, or it might be this, or it might be this. One important thing that you have to remember with identifying via iNaturalist or PlantNet or anything where it's using computer identification to identify your plant is you just need to check real quick and make sure it is actually that plant. And the plant that they're proposing is not a plant that only grows in the northernmost reaches of Siberia and that you would never see on a beach in eastern Nova Scotia, because that's happened before. Trust me, that's happened to me before. Another way you can help is by doing surveys. So this is something that Christine and I had been doing throughout the summer, actually. We had been developing a method, me, Christine, and Camilla, more specifically, have been developing a method to easily identify beach vegetation with enough scientific rigor to have valid observations. So I'm just going to stop sharing my screen here and move to another document that discusses in more detail how we identify these plants and how we record them with scientific rigor. So if you'll all give me a quick moment here. Here we go. All right. So this is the beach vegetation monitoring protocol that we have developed via a couple trips in order to make observations of plants on the beach. So there's some terminology here that I want to explain to you guys, first of all. There's a concept of a transect. A transect is basically a very, very long line that stretches from the top of a dune all the way down to the edge of the ocean. This line needs to be perpendicular to the edge of the ocean, and ideally, this line is placed in an area where there's lots and lots of plants, so you can get the most complete view of the plants that are available in the beach as possible. So that's what transect is. Ideally, on each beach, we want to set up at least 3 transects. And when you start a transect, you want to start it at either the top of the dune, the highest point of the dune, or all the way back where the boardwalks, where a boardwalk starts, or all the way back where the cliff starts. Once you've decided where your transect's starting, you want to stake the beginning of your line where it starts, and then you want to stake the end of your line all the way down about 1 meter past the last plant that you can see. That would be the last plant that's closest to the edge of the water. Once this is done, there's a couple of minor things you need to do: measuring geographic orientation, taking a picture. All of those are just for metadata information. And then what you want to do is you want to identify all of the plants along the transect. How we do this is using what's called a quadrat. A quadrat is basically just a massive square. It's a massive square whose sides are 1 meter, 1 meter, 1 meter, 1 meter. You place it down beside the transect, and you look in that square and think, I wonder what plants are in that square. Once you figured out what plants are in that square, you also want to consider, well, how many of those plants are in that square? And so you would scroll, please. Thank you. And so here we have a couple of ways to describe how many of a certain plant are in the square. It's important to remember here that that the abundance we're recording is always relative abundance. It's always how much of this plant is there relative to all the other plants in the square, not necessarily how much of this plant is covering the area of the square. If you have one individual plant, you'll record it as A. If you have a few plants, you'll record it as B. If the amount of this plant is the same as the amount of another plant, you'll record it as C. If there are more of this plant than the other plant, you'll record it as D. And sorry, you'll have to give me a moment. The fire alarm in our building is going off. I'm really sorry. Oh, never mind. It stopped. Okay, never mind. Everything's fine. Everything's fine, folks. It was just a false alarm, I suppose. And E is, yes, I'm very glad it was a false alarm. And E is for when that plant is the only plant found in the quadrat.
What's the difference between E and A then?
So A is usually used when you have a lot of plants in the quadrat, and let's just say you have 5 grasses and 3 shrubs and 1 rose plant. Here, A would be used to describe that rose plant. If you have a quadrat with only the rose plant, then that would be E.
Okay.
Awesome. And then you basically go down this whole line that you've established from the top of the dune to the beach, just continually placing down the square, recording the plants that are on it in the square, recording the abundance in the square. And once you get down to the end of the beach, you're done. That's it. Now all you have to do is take 2 photos, one from the shoreline all the way up to the top of the dune, facing the top of the dune, and the other from the top of the dune facing the shoreline, and record your data, and you're done. That's it. So give me another moment. I'm just going to stop sharing the screen and share the presentation again. So, yes, Christelle, what's up? Alternatively, you can, if you put your question in the messages area, it'll be easier for me to get back to it at the end. And your question might also be covered in the remaining part of the webinar. So you may be wondering, how did we develop this? Well, we went on 3 trips. Trip 1, I didn't go on. Christine was fortunate enough to go on this trip. This trip was just about going and learning about and identifying plants. It was a lot of walking on beaches, looking at a plant, going, "Ooh, what's that plant?" and trying to look through the guidebook to figure out what it was, taking a photo maybe, identifying it using PlantNet, comparing it to other plants that you found. It was a lot of fun. Our second trip, which Christine and I did together, was solidifying the list of plants and developing a survey method. During the previous trip, we had created a list of all the plants that we had seen. In this trip, we solidified that list. We figured out, oh, what plants are on this list that we don't have or that we don't see, and what plants aren't on this list that we are seeing. And we note them down. And the other thing is we developed this survey method that I just described to you all during this second trip. And during the third trip, We just did surveys. We went around to quite a few beaches. If you're familiar with a couple of these, Black Duck Cove, we went to Port Hilford. We went to not Port Bickerton. We did not go to Port Bickerton. We went to Seabreeze Beach, and we did 3 surveys per beach. Yep, Torbay Beach. We did 3 surveys per beach at all of these beaches. And it was great, and it allowed us to flesh out and solidify our methodology for these surveys so that we can present this methodology to you all. So if you are all curious about what we figured out, well, there's a couple of plants that we found were on most beaches. This plant over here, Amophilia breviculata, you might know better as beach grass, American beach grass. It's this one over here. This was not on nearly every single beach we went to. One thing I do want to note about this is, if I recall correctly, this species is actually not native to Nova Scotia. There's beach grasses that are, but this one in particular, despite how common it is, it's actually not native to Nova Scotia. Another plant we saw very often was Atriplex prostrata, prostrate-leafed orach. This I had mentioned to you guys earlier in the native versus invasive, is in fact invasive. Caculia edentula, sea rocket, is in fact a native plant though. And it's one of the plants that are edible. It's delicious. If you see it on the beach, you can just take a leaf and eat it. It's great. There's a couple of plants that we also found on very few to only one beach. Carex bullata, which is button sedge, we only managed to find it on one beach. And that actually was in Seabreeze. Potentilla norvegica, also known as Norwegian, which one was this? Sorry, give me a moment. Let me refer back to my pocket guide. Potentilla norvegica, also known as Norwegian cinquefoil. Norwegian cinquefoil we did only find on one beach, and that one beach we found it on was in Fox Island, which is ironically right across from Seabreeze Beach, which is where we found the only instance of button sedge, Carex bullata. Stellaria media, also known as chickweed, ironically is a very common weed. I've seen it everywhere in gardens and such. It's also called chickweed, but we only saw it in one beach in our surveys. But yeah, so that's a summary of the surveys we've done. Do you guys have any questions? Feel free to raise your hand if you have any questions. Yes, Lorraine.
These aren't just these aren't the only plants you found, right?
Oh gosh, no. we found about, in the end, I think 60 different species.
Okay, I know a whole lot more than that. So.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, there are significantly more than just these. We found about 60 different species. Some native, some non-native. Some of them grow exclusively in coastal areas. Some of them grow both on the coast, but also in disturbed areas. So there's a lot more than just these 6. Yeah. Sure, Jack, go ahead.
I'm not sure which beach have I been assigned a beach, or do I get to pick the beach that I?
You do get to pick the beach.
Oh, good.
if you want to stick around for a bit afterwards, we can have you. Do you have a team yet? Are you in a team?
No, I'm not on a team. I live on a beach on
Oh,
Bay.
oh,
It's very convenient. I live near Port Shoreham,
yeah.
but it occurs to me that Port Shoreham, they lock the gate in the wintertime, and then it's a very long walk down to the beach.
Oh boy, yeah, yeah. I will probably have a meeting with you at some point, or I will email you to schedule a meeting.
Good.
Because we should talk about that.
Yeah. We could do
Yeah,
both.
and I will like to add that we were in Port Shoreham doing this identification because we have I think we were in 18 different beaches during the summer, but it's quite I think a good number of beaches, and one of them, I think the Northeast beach, was Port Shoreham. And I think that the good news related with the beach vegetation for you, Jack, is that this beach vegetation monitoring is only during summer, so from June to August only.
Okay.
Because before June, here in Nova Scotia, and at least in the Eastern Shore, before June we don't have even spring. It's too cold for plants.
Yeah.
And in September, most of the plants, they don't have. They are just in the period that they have the fruits. They don't have the flowers. That also I will like, Abirami, you can maybe explain us after the question that the team has. You can explain us a little more about this life cycle of the plants and why we need to go during summer, and why September we decide that it's too late to go for doing the identification. And also I would like that if you can explain us about, from the ecology perspective, what is and why is important the abundance and the distribution. Because last year we started just identify the species. I think Anne and Leon that are here today in the webinar, they have been with us since last year. Surely you remember that we were to the beaches, but just to identify the beach, but the plant. But now we have this method that allow us very easily to identify this distribution of the plants and this abundance. But what does it mean? Okay, Abirami, this is for you. But I think first, Tim, you have your hand raised.
Yes, you're only identifying species within the quadrant you put down. So where do you put the quadrant? Same place each time, or would make more sense?
No, so you remember how I mentioned the transect that goes from the top of the dune all the way down to the end of the beach? So you place the quadrant down along that transect. So you place it down. Once you're done observing the plants in that area, you move it to the next meter. You observe the plants in that area, move it to the next meter.
Oh, okay. So like we did measuring the slope of the beach, moving it each consecutively down. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly that. Now I don't have the best I don't have the best memory. So Camilo, could you repeat the questions that you had?
Yes, I will write here in the chat, but just first, you can explain out what is abundance and distribution.
Yeah.
And why this is important from the ecology perspective.
Okay, yeah. So we're measuring abundance by, as I mentioned, measuring how much of each plant there is in a specific segment. And we're also measuring distribution, which is how each of these species, where they're found along the beach, and how they're distributed along the beach. This is important because certain plants play certain different roles. Some plants act as essentially anchors for the beach. As I mentioned before, Rosa virginiana is one of them. They act as anchors for the beach. Other plants don't quite act the same way. You have plants like Atriplex prostrata and Camellia dentula, hastate leaf orach, and sea rocket that both don't nearly have as deep roots, but still provide an important source of food and also are found further down the beach, where the sand shifts more and they're more prone to stronger weather, stronger storms. And so your other question, why are we only monitoring from June to August? So that's a great question. Generally, wild plants on the beach do sprout and are seedlings in April, May. Yeah, April to May, they're seedlings. But before they flower, it's generally fairly hard to identify plants. Some plants, you can easily tell what plant they are by the leaves. Things like Camellia edentula, sea rocket. I keep coming back to it because it's the example that's on the slide. But you can see over here, it has a very specific leaf shape. And if you see it in real life, you'll see that it's fairly thick. It's pretty easy to identify. But other plants like chickweed or beach grass, they're hard to identify when they don't have the flowers. This period of time, June to August, is a time when most of these plants are flowering, and thus it's the easiest to identify, and we can get the best and most scientifically accurate estimation of what plants are found on the beach as possible. Tim? Yep.
Do you identify marine algae that are lying on the beach when if the quadrant falls over one of them?
We do not identify marine algae. We stick to exclusively terrestrial plants.
Okay.
As to why, it's mainly because that marine algae can move around, and so it doesn't have as much of an importance to the ecosystem. It's not unimportant to the ecosystem. It is important to the ecosystem. It's important in a different way than these terrestrial plants are.
Yeah, and I would like to add to this answer that we discovered that we have a big gap of information and data about the plants that are on beaches and dunes. So we have many, I don't say many people, that a lot, but at least more than the beaches on dunes. And so there are researchers working on in coastal lagoons, in wetlands, and also in eelgrass. So there are quite scientific groups, the researchers working on that. But on beaches, mainly in the species that we have on beaches and dunes, we don't have many people working on that. So we decide to cover this gap, and through our citizen science initiative, but we needed a method, and this is why we create this method that is, we think that is quite simple to identify. And our plan is that next year, all of us that we are here on the webinar, we go to the beach, use the method, and start comparing one to another. And most probably we will need to make some adjustment to the method, because, for example, we need to have an atlas of the different objects with the quadrants, because these A, B, C, D, E are not totally easy to understand at the first sight. And sometimes you are in situations, it happened to us in Port Hereford, that we were with one of our citizen scientists, that is Caroline, that we three were in Port Hereford, and we have many conversations about, okay, what is that? What is this is B or is C or is D? And also something important is to mention the zero, but I will leave to you, Abirami, you are the guest speaker, that you can explain us about the zero, because I think this zero is very important.
Yes, I unfortunately did forget to mention the zero, but I will mention it now. Zero here, we're using zero to represent an absence of plants. So let's just say you have a quadrat, it's massive, 1 by 1 meter, completely empty, except for one tiny plant in the middle. Now you could say, okay, this plant is the only plant there, so I guess that's all of the plants there. We're calling it E for everything. But instead, we've essentially to rectify that and to prevent the confusion that would come from seeing this data later and thinking, oh, I guess that quadrat was covered with that plant, we're also considering the lack of plants as a notable variable. So in this case, this quadrat with mostly empty space and one tiny little plant in the middle will be noted down as 0D, where it's most of the plant, most of the quadrat is covered with nothing. It's covered with nothing. And there's 1A of this singular tiny plant in the middle. Does anyone have any other questions? If not, thanks so much for coming to the webinar. I love talking about plants. This has been great to present to you all of the work that we've done and why it's so important to care about plants on, again, not just the eastern shore of Nova Scotia, which is where we are. It's important for us to care about the plants there, but on shores everywhere across the world. All right, thank you so much.
Okay, thank you, Abirami, for your presentation. And I think this is just really new. We are now with this research, we are in the edge of the knowledge with beach vegetation on the eastern shore, because we have this gap, we know, but also with the method in citizen science. So, and you are being part of that. We plan to have, hopefully no more than a month, we're gonna have the final version of our identification pocket guide that some of you were in the first field trip in which we were showing with Christine. She was showing to you the guide, this very first version. We were with Professor Patricia from Mexico, that she was here in the webinar, I think the 6th webinar, and she was also in one of the pictures that Abirami showed to us. So this is a work in progress, and all of us, we are be part of that. So thank you very much for staying here. Hopefully during the winter, you will continue be thinking on plants, and we will be training ourselves in how to identify the plants, to be more familiar with the 54 species we identified. These are quite, we don't have yet published the results in a scientific journal. We're gonna do it soon, but just to give you some news, we identified 54 different species here on the eastern shore of Nova Scotia and our beaches. The idea is that next year you will be able to identify all of them. I don't say as a snap, very easily, because some of them are not really easy to identify, but at least that you feel comfortable to go to the beach 3 times during the summer, measure the distribution and the abundance in your beaches. And it will be great for the plants, it will be great for our beaches, but also it will be great for us as a community members, that we know this information and we share with others, and to be an example for other regions of the world. So thank you everyone for staying here and for keep this network alive. See you in the next webinar.
See you. Lorraine, before you go, Lorraine, can I talk to you quickly?